Very good. Very good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Vidyan Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti 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 Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvaguha Gruhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarva Vide Namaha. Om. Good. Nice to see you all. Welcome. Welcome also to the many students who continue to attend this class online each week. We continue with our study of chapter 17, and we've just concluded a very important section in which Sri Shankaracharya starts with ordinary experience and deconstructs that ordinary experience in a particular way that leads you to discover that present in that ordinary experience is something really extraordinary. Your true nature as consciousness. Hidden in plain sight, as they say. Present as the consciousness by which you know what's happening right now, but the full nature of that consciousness remains unknown, hidden by ignorance. So, by deconstructing this, or you don't need a special experience to become enlightened, deconstructing this ordinary experience, according to Shankaracharya, is sufficient for you to discover your true nature as sat-chit-ananda Atma. But, there's always a but. But generally that's not sufficient, because even when you get that insight, and it's usually during a class like this, that you get that insight, so, whoa, my consciousness right now is that. So you get that little insight during a class, and then by the time you get home after class, what's happened to that insight? It's vanished already. So that points to the need for assimilation, and assimilation is accomplished through the practice of nididhyasana. Nididhyasana we translate often as Vedantic meditation or Vedantic contemplation, as Shankara shifts to nididhyasana in the next several verses, and as we go through, most of you already know, we've already discussed in earlier chapters what is nididhyasana. There was one chapter actually dedicated to nididhyasana. I forget if it was chapter 10? So chapter 10. So if you're not familiar with nididhyasana, please go back and review chapter 10 of this text, because I probably won't describe it in great detail, because otherwise we won't make it through these wonderful verses. So these wonderful verses, instead of explaining how nididhyasana works, for that go back to chapter 10. But for how to perform nididhyasana, that's what we're going to discuss today. So instead of analyzing nididhyasana, we're going to have examples of nididhyasana in today's class, starting with verse 68. And this is working okay, looks like it. All right, so let's continue. Ahameva cha bhuteshu, ahameva cha bhuteshu, sarveshveko nabho yata, sarveshveko yato yata, Mayi sarvani bhutani, Mayi sarvani bhutani, Pashyan hevam na jayate, Pashyan hevam na jayate. Aham eva. A good indication that we're shifting to nididhyasana is when Sri Shankaracharya starts using the first person in his teachings. Aham is a pronoun I, first person singular. Aham eva because the basic principle of nididhyasana is to see the truth, and here's the brief definition of nididhyasana. For the more elaborate definition, go back to chapter 10. The brief definition is this: to see in the immediate moment the truth of who you are based on what you've already understood from these teachings. So assimilation works by seeing that same, that insight you've gained in class, you return to that insight again and again and again, pardon me for doing this, and again and again and again and again, because it takes a while. And gradually, that insight begins to shine very brightly. And actually, in our satsang later, we're going to talk about that more. So this is a basic idea. That insight is seeing your true nature here and now. And that's why Shankara uses a first person to do this. I am. Notice the difference between saying Atma is sat-chit-ananda and I am sat-chit-ananda. These are completely different statements with a very different effect on how we think and feel. So Atma is sat-chit-ananda. Atma is where we start. But I am sat-chit-ananda Atma is nididhyasana for the sake of assimilation. And that's what he says here. Aham eva, I indeed, bhuteshu sarveshu. Actually, start with the metaphor. He uses a metaphor. Yat in the second line. Yata ekaha nabhas. Nabhas is space. Yata, just as ekaha nabhas, one space. One space is present sarveshu bhuteshu. You have to break apart the word. Sarveshu ekaha. Sarveshweko, due to grammar rules. So, just as one space is sarveshu bhuteshu, in all beings and all things, in the same way, aham eva, I am in all beings. And hold on, in a few minutes I'll give you a way of contemplating on that. I, of course, as consciousness, as all-pervasive consciousness, as the consciousness which isn't stuck inside your head, not stuck inside your body, the consciousness which is boundaryless, limitless. So in that way, like one space abides in all beings, in the same way, I, as pure consciousness, I abide in all beings. Now there's a flip side to this, because you've heard here or elsewhere the fact that we can say that space pervades this room, which is a correct statement, but we've observed several times that it's more correct to say that this room is in space. Space is in this room is correct. This room is in space is more correct. That's the idea. And that's what he says here. So just as this one space, ekaha nabhas, just as one space is sarveshu bhuteshu, in all things, in the same way that one space is sarvani bhutani, all beings are in that one space, just as this room is in space, all beings exist in space, and then the darshtanta, what the metaphor represents, is in the same way aham, actually in the third line, mayi. Sarvani bhutani, all beings exist, mayi, in me. In what sense? This consciousness, as we've understood, is boundaryless, limitless, like space. Space isn't stuck inside this room. This room is in space. Consciousness isn't stuck inside your head or body. So therefore, your head or body, head and body, are in space, in consciousness. Sorry. You have to keep flipping back and forth here. So your body is in consciousness. Where does your consciousness end and my consciousness begin? We've discussed this before. So your consciousness being all pervasive not only does it not stop at the edge of your body, it doesn't stop at the beginning of my body. So my body exists in the same consciousness, the same ekaha. That's a key word in this verse. That same one consciousness. And to go back to a teaching we've seen many times long ago, there is but one all-pervasive consciousness manifest within all of us, and that is the teaching that Shankara is presenting here, not for the sake of instruction. Nididhyasana presumes that you've already understood this, and you have. In many prior classes, you've already understood this. So here, it's presented for nididhyasana, aham eva, using that first person, and the other key word is in the fourth line, pashyan evam, seeing thus. And interesting his use of the word pashyan. Same kind of, what is the word? Idiom is the word I'm looking for. An idiomatic usage of a word, like we do in English. Do you see what I mean? Have you ever seen a meaning? So it's an idiomatic usage of the word to see. And why do we use it? Because seeing is something very immediate, very direct. Meanings can be conceptual, can be abstract. When you see me, anything conceptual or abstract? You see this right in front of your eyes. So we used that verb to see, both in English and in Sanskrit, and I think in all languages, because we used the verb see when we mean to know, because the verbs to see has an immediacy and directness associated with it. So Shankara uses that idiom here, pashyan evam, seeing thus. And that is nididhyasana. To see your true nature here and now. And see, of course, in a metaphoric, in an idiomatic sense, not literally see. And one who has seen thus, na jayate. Just add some words of praise. That person is never reborn again. That person gains liberation. So, how does this, here we have Shankara telling you, this is a nididhyasana practice to be performed. The next step is to actually know how to perform it. And I'm going to just suggest it now very briefly, how this would be done. I'll mention in passing that pretty soon we're going to restart our advanced meditation classes. They will be on Wednesday evenings at 7 o'clock, tentatively just after the first of the year. We're planning to restart those classes. And one of the main themes of those classes will be this nididhyasana. So we're not going to perform nididhyasana now. That's what we're going to do in those advanced meditations. But let me describe how you would perform nididhyasana on what Shankara has presented here. Suppose, in fact, just for a minute, close your eyes and just go along and just imagine So imagine that you're going deeper and deeper into meditation. And as you go deeper and deeper into meditation, you first lose any contact with the outside world. You don't see anything, you don't hear anything, you don't feel anything. You don't feel anything with your skin. That leads to a very interesting thing. When you turn your attention away from the sense of touch, you lose connection with your body. And as you go deeper and deeper into meditation, not only do you lose connection to the world around you, you lose connection to your body. Before meditation, you are in the world. During meditation, you are no longer in the world. Before meditation, you are in your body. In deep meditation, what body? Your awareness of your body has disappeared. So now, having reached this state of meditation, this is preparatory. Nididhyasana begins after gaining this state of deep meditation. So after losing awareness of the world around you, after losing awareness of your body, nididhyasana begins. And it begins with the question. You introduce to nididhyasana is not meditation per se, it's contemplation. You contemplate upon a teaching. And a good way to introduce that teaching now is to introduce a question. And that question is, where am I? And at first, the answer is, I am here now. Okay? I am here now. Where is here? Where is here? What an interesting question. You can open up your eyes now. Only a Vedantin could ask a question like that. Where is here? Well, consider it going back to Shankara's metaphor. Space is here. Space is here and here and here and here and here. Space is everywhere. The way it works is you lose contact with your body. Your body is what makes consciousness feel confined. And when you lose contact with your body, when your attention is so focused that you're not aware of the sense of touch, and it takes a little practice to get there, but you can get there, then you lose awareness of your body, and you find, when you say, I am here now, where is the edge of you? Where is the boundary? Where is the limit? Where are you not? This is where the meditation, where the contemplation proceeds. So the first stage is to attain this rather deep meditation. Second stage is you can introduce a question or something else like, where am I? And the third part is to recognize, and this is where it ends, I have no boundary. Because in your experience at that moment, do you have any boundary? None whatsoever. That then becomes an experiential confirmation of what you have learned already. Let me cross off that. I don't want that word learned here. An experiential confirmation of what you have discovered through the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. That is nididhyasana. And we can look forward to doing this particular nididhyasana when we resume our advanced meditation classes. Okay, next example of nididhyasana. Nabahyam madhyato vantar, nabahyam antrato vantar, vidyate nyat swatah kvachata, vidyate nyat swatah kvachata, abhahyanta shrute kinchata, abhahyanta shrute kinchata, tasmat chuddha swayam prabha. Tasmat Here's a funny comment. There are some times that not knowing Sanskrit is an advantage. Because if you know Sanskrit, and you see that at the end of the first line, vanta. Vanta means vomit. Yick! But of course, it's not vanta at all. It's va antar. Anyway, we'll come to that in a moment. Actually, let me introduce this. There are many ways to perform nididhyasana. Shankara in this verse, in fact in the next 3 verses, we'll see how far we get today. In the next 3 verses, he's giving examples of nididhyasana performed based on a scriptural statement. So you start with scripture, and then and scripture, of course, that you've already discovered the true meaning of that scripture. Remember, nididhyasana follows shravana. Shravana is where you make that discovery. Manana is the state when is the practice when you remove any doubts or vagueness, and then nididhyasana is the process of assimilation we're talking about now. We've discussed this shravana, manana, nididhyasana in many prior classes, so we won't go further into that right now. So, based on a particular scriptural text, you can meditate. And Shankara in the next 3 verses is going to actually give 4 scriptures upon which you can contemplate. The first one, look at the 3rd line. Abhyantaha shutehe kinchita. Shutehe, according to the scripture, abhya antaha. This is a reference, in fact, each of these references are to the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, which is just full of such profound teachings. And since Shankara is saying we should do nididhyasana based on these scriptures, well, then we should look at the scripture and not just use. Shankara only uses 2 words, abhya antaha. So we look at the scripture, and what we find, I gotta find the right script, here it is. And what we find here, tad etad brahma, that Brahman, that reality that we're talking about, is apurvam anaparam. There's nothing prior to it, existentially prior to it. Apurvam, there's nothing after it. Anaparam. Sorry. There's nothing after it, existentially after it. There's no cause or effect associated with it. Anantaram, and that's what one of the 2 words Shankara quotes here, and abhahyam. There's nothing inside and nothing outside. So from the standpoint of space, that metaphor doesn't work here. So we're talking about Brahman, the reality because of which everything exists. From the standpoint of Brahman, there is only Brahman. Therefore, there's nothing inside or outside. Notice that the metaphor of space doesn't work here at all. That was a prior verse. Now we're on where our contemplation now has a different subject matter, different topic. So that Brahman has nothing inside, nothing outside. Better to say it includes all that is inside or outside. And finally the statement, Ayam Atma Brahma. You've heard that. That's one of the 4 main Mahavakyas. Ayam Atma, the self that is your consciousness, is this Brahman, this fundamental reality, which is Sarva Anubhuhu, the experiencer of all, the consciousness that abides in all sentient beings, giving rise to experience. So this is the scriptural passage that Shankara brings up for the sake of nididhyasana. And he just quotes two words. He quotes abahya antaha, and he presumes that you've already studied the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and you already know that it comes in the 2nd chapter, 5th section, verse 19. Not like I knew that. I've written it down here. I didn't know that. Find the references. The commentator will always give these, if not the and actually, on a traditional commentary, I'm following the Sanskrit commentary of one Ramakrishna, not the Ramakrishna you're thinking about. This one lived about 500 years ago. It's a very important Sanskrit commentary. And for the commentary, then the editor provides what's called a tika. A tika is like a sub-commentary or notes. And in those notes, the editor will tell you exactly which verse is being referred to. Okay, that being said, so we've already seen the verse. Now go to the top and we'll see Shankara describing this meditation. He says that when you're meditating, you find na bahyam. There is nothing outside of you. Madhyataha, there's nothing in the middle. And va antar, there's nothing inside. No inside, middle, or outside. That is a deconstruction of dimension. Shankara is describing a nididhyasana on dimensionlessness. He says, na vidyate anyat. There is nothing else that exists, swataha, other than oneself, kvachit. There is nothing else that exists whatsoever. The only, let's see, is that where we're going? There's this still. Yeah. There is nothing else that exists. Actually, that's going to be part of the next. Let me set that aside. He says it here, but it's going to be really in the next meditation. Let's focus on this dimensionlessness, because this idea of nothing else exists is going to be really the next nididhyasana. So let's just focus here on dimensionlessness. Nothing outside, nothing in the middle, nothing inside, and then the conclusion, what is experientially confirmed through this nididhyasana, he says in the last line, tasmat, therefore, as confirmed by this nididhyasana, shuddhaha swayam prabhaha. And you have to soak that I from the prior verse continuous. I am shuddhaha swayam prabhaha. Simply, I am pure consciousness. Swayam Prabha is that which is self-shining, a very common way of describing consciousness. I am pure consciousness, and as we've just said in many prior classes, pure consciousness means consciousness and nothing but consciousness. Consciousness which is utterly unconnected and unaffected by the world around us. And in meditation, the way this is done is to simply make your mind silent. As we said, I didn't say, so I'm going to say now, generally, in formal seated nididhyasana, meditation precedes nididhyasana. The first step is to practice meditation to create some mental condition which is helpful for the sake of this, whatever is the contemplation you're doing. In this case, the suggestion is you perform a meditation technique that makes your mind silent. Now, that's not such a big deal. You don't have to make your mind silent for an hour. You don't have to make your mind silent for a minute. You only have to make your mind silent for a few seconds. How long does it take to recognize something? If you see a person in the distance, how long does it take to recognize? Do you have to stare at them for an hour? For a minute? You get the point. Recognition takes place very quickly. Our minds are wired like that, thank goodness. So in this nididhyasana, all you need is a few moments of silence. And in those few moments of silence, now, actually, after, we'll do all of this in the advanced meditation session. During those few moments of silence, what can you contemplate? And I'm kind of asking a rhetorical question here to make a point. In a moment of silence, you can't do anything. There's no thoughts. But before those few moments of silence, you can think. So, before those few moments of silence, you think, who am I? And then you let your mind go silent. And then after the few moments of silence, then you can answer your question, who am I? I am the pure consciousness that remained in those few moments of silence. That's how it works. And we'll do it in more detail in our advanced meditation session, but this is what it is. You use those in the few moments of silence, the only thing that remains is you. Who am I? I am that which remained present in those few moments of silence. It's a wonderful kind of contemplation. Okay, next one. Shankara's on a roll here. Neti netyadi shastrebhyaha Neti netyadi shastrebhyaha prapancho pashamo dvayaha prapancho pashamo dvayaha avijñātādi shastracha naiva jñeyo hyatonyata naiva jñeyo hyatonyata. Neti, neti, iti, you've heard that. Where does that come from? Same Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Ityadi shastrebhyaha, from scriptural statements such as neti, neti, from those scriptural statements which negate everything. What is the result of that? Prapancha upashamaha. Upashamaha, the negation of prapancha, all that exists, all that is created. The world is created, your body is created, prana is created, mind is created, memories are created, thoughts are created, emotions are created. Prapancha upashama, the negation of all that is known, the negation of all that is knowable. What remains? What remains is advayaha, one non-dual reality, which is you. So here Shankara gives, in this verse he gives two different meditations, two different contemplations. The first one is, I'll just describe it kind of in simple words, but it needs to be really practiced very carefully, but we'll, as I said, we'll do these in our advanced meditation sessions. By the way, I'm sure some of our online students are wondering, and I'll answer the question now. Yes, those advanced meditations will be published online. I think that's very, very important. So they will be accessible not only to our local students, but to all of our students. Okay, so this particular meditation, neti neti, is performed by first making your mind very quiet, and then by recognizing the contemplation is on this truth. I am the knower. Everything known to me is not I. I am the knower of all. All that is known to me is not I. What is known to me? The world around me. What is known to me? Physical body. What is known to me? Prana, mind, senses, all of our faculties. All this is known to me. I am that by which all is known. I am the consciousness by which all is known. That consciousness is what's left over. In Sanskrit they say avashesha. When you get rid of everything else, what's left? Consciousness. And the consciousness that remains, Shankara says here, advaya, that one non-dual consciousness is what remains when all that is known is negated. So this, I'm using words to describe what you would contemplate upon in nididhyasana. And please note, contemplation means you have to think. It may be supported by moments of silence in meditation, but contemplation is an active condition of your mind. If your mind is perfectly still, you can't contemplate. So you bring in these very profound teachings, and then what distinguishes it from Shravana, what we're doing now, what distinguishes it is when you see the truth of those words here and now. So in contemplation, when you see, I am the non-dual consciousness by whom all duality is known. All duality is known to non-dual consciousness. I am that non-dual consciousness. So that's the first of two, very profound. The first of two contemplations Shankara describes here. Second one, avijñātari shastrat cha, and shastrat, from the scripture that begins avijñātari. And of course, you all know that's chapter 3, section 8, verse 11. I'm being silly. That's why we have books. That's why we have commentaries. That's why we have notes. Okay. So here, tadvai etad aksharam gargi. Gargi, this is where Yajnavalkya is teaching Gargi. And so he says, that immutable, non-dual reality we're talking about is what? Yajnavalkya describes it as the adrishtam drashtra, the unseen seer. Ashrutam shrotra, the unheard hearer. Amatam mantra, the unthought thinker. Avijñātam vijñātra, and there's our quote. So we've already got unthought thinker. The undiscerned discerner. How's that? You have to find some other words here. Sanskrit is much nicer than English. He says, na anyat ataha asti drashtra. There is nothing other than the seer. Na anyat ataha asti shrotra. There is nothing other than the hearer. Na anyat ataha asti mantra. There's nothing other than the thinker. Na anyat ataha asti vijñātra. nothing other than the discerner. Etasmin nu kalu akshare gargi. This is indeed what we mean by this immutable reality, the immutable reality which is, actually like in a prior line, the knower. Here's the point. It's related to the earlier nididhyasana, that negation. When you negate everything that's seen, you're making a contrast between seer and seen. So you are the seer of all that is seen, which is negated. You are the hearer of all that is heard, which is negated, and so forth. You are the thinker of all that is thought, which is negated. And what you end up with is you. There's no other way of putting it. When all that is not you is negated, what's left? That's how this meditation works. Through that, the negation was suggested before, and this other passage in the Brihadaranyaka suggests a different kind of negation. When all that is known is negated, all that remains is the knower. But now there's a little trick here. What is a knower in the absence of known? It's a little philosophical, but most of you can get it. There's no such thing as a knower if there's not anything known. The moment you say knower, you're talking about a duality between knower and known. If there's nothing known, you can't really speak of a knower, or a hearer, or a seer, or a thinker, or a discerner. There's only consciousness, the consciousness which is you. Only consciousness. Only consciousness is that, Shankara used the word advaya, non-dual. Only consciousness means non-dual consciousness. There's only consciousness, there is nothing else, which is what he says in the last line here. Na eva gneyaha hi ataha anyata. There is nothing else that can be known. This goes a little further. Suppose, yeah, we'll leave. I think we'll leave it there. That's better. Let's see the next verse. We get more. As I said, Shankara is nice American expression. He is on a roll. I like all these American idioms, and nice for people from other countries. You can all get these. You'll learn some American idioms here. From the very American Swami. You won't. What can I say? Okay, let's continue. Sarvasyatmahameveti, sarvasyatmahameveti, brahma chet veditam, veditam param, brahma chet veditam param, sa atma sarva bhutanam, sa atma sarva bhutanam, atma hyeshamiti shrutehe, atma hyeshamiti shrutehe. In the last line, he's giving you another scripture. Atma hi esham iti shrutehe. According to the scripture, shrutehe means from the shruti, from this particular scripture, the scripture which begins Atma hi esham. Chapter 1, 410. 1, 410, which I have marked. These are excellent passages. Obviously, Shankara is not going to quote kind of a less important passage. He'll always quote the very important passages. And here, Atma hi esham sabhavati. The Atma of these. And here we have to back up in order to get the context. You have to get the passage. He's only giving you 3 words from the passage. To get the passage, in this case, go back to the beginning. And I'll just share this with you very briefly. We've got time. Just to share this with you briefly. Brahma vai idam agre asit. This is really going back to the beginning. Agre asit. In the beginning, there was Brahma vai. Idam agre asit. Idam, all this, agre, at the beginning, asit was Brahma vai. Nothing but Brahman. Tad atmanam eva avet. And Brahman knew itself alone. This is very poetic. Brahman knew itself alone. What did Brahman think? Brahman doesn't think, you know that. But if Brahman could think in a poetic way, Brahman would think, aham brahma asmi. Naturally, what else is he going to think? Tasmat sarvam abhavata. And from that Brahman, everything arose. And now we'll skip ahead. It goes on for quite a while. So from before creation, there was only Brahman. But from that Brahman, everything arose, to paraphrase what we've just seen. And that leads then to this passage. Atma hi esham sahabhavati. That Brahman, sahabhavati, that Brahman is Atma esham, the self of all. The Brahman, in the beginning, nothing was manifest. After everything becomes manifest, Brahman is Atma esham, the self of all that exists. The self of all that exists means the essence. Let's see. Oh, we'll let Shankara explain it. So this is a passage that you're to contemplate on, and now he describes that contemplation starting at the beginning. Sarvasya atma aham eva iti. So the nature of this meditation is sarvasya atma aham. Aham, I am sarvasya atma, the self of all. As I said, contemplation requires thinking. What are you thinking here? What does it mean to think, to say, I am the self of all? By the way, oftentimes contemplation is based on a phrase, often a scriptural phrase. And here Shankara is saying, he is giving you a formula for contemplation. What is that formula for contemplation? Sarvasya atma aham. I am the self of all. Now, what contemplation is not is to repeat, I am the self of all, I am the self of all, I am the self of all. That's not even Vedanta, actually. That kind of mindless repetition has no place in the teachings of Vedanta. Shankara used that verb pashyan, seeing, in the prior verse. So you can't just repeat sarvasya atma aham, but you have to see the truth of it. I am the self of all. What does it mean to be the self of all? Well, go back to the earlier discussion about being boundaryless. When you recognize that I am boundaryless consciousness, so then how can I not be the self of all? That boundaryless consciousness is a consciousness in all beings. It's not stuck in a particular place. Because consciousness cannot be stuck in a particular place, that consciousness, that atma, which aham, which I am, is the atma not just of me, but sarvasya. Which is why we often joke about the statement, my consciousness. We start off with that statement, my consciousness, and discover it's wrong. What you thought was my consciousness is not yours. You don't have a proprietary relationship. What a funny expression. You don't have a special or proprietary relationship with that consciousness, because what you call my consciousness is the same as my consciousness. You say my consciousness, I say my consciousness. It's the same consciousness. That's what sarvasya atma means. And sarvasya atma, the consciousness of all, is aham. I am that consciousness of all. That is the nature of this contemplation. Brahma chet viditam param. And if one recognizes viditam chet, if one recognizes this param, this consciousness as the fundamental reality, Brahma, sa'at, and one recognizes this as sa-atma sarva bhutanam, is just explaining what he said in the first line. Saha Brahma, well, this is actually, he's explaining what the Upanishad says. That Brahman, which is a little further than what I've said actually, the Brahman, which is the reality because of which all exists, Saha Atma Sarva Bhutanam. That is the reality because of which all beings exist. Meaning, in contemplation, to appreciate the fact that the consciousness because of which this individual being exists is the consciousness because of which all beings exist. To appreciate that truth immediately and directly is the nididhyasana. There is the consciousness which I am, the consciousness because of which I exist is a consciousness because of which everything exists. And Shankara now, good timing. Shankara concludes these examples of nididhyasana in the next verse. And we'll also conclude with that. Jivash chet paramatmanam, jivash chet paramatmanam, swatmanam devamanjasa, swatmanam devamanjasa, devopasya sadevanam, devopasya sadevanam, pashutvat cha nivartate, pashutvat cha nivartate. You're not an animal, thank goodness. We'll see if actually, Shankara, I'll share with you in just a moment. He goes back to that passage. Let's start at the top, though. Chet, suppose, jivaha, an individual person like you, suppose you get it. That swatmanam paramatmanam. You get it. Devam. Suppose you get anjasa. You get this truth correctly. Anjasa has several meanings. Here it means correctly. Suppose you get correctly that swatmanam, your true nature, is paramatmanam, the reality of everything. Jivat, in common parlance, jivatma is Paramatma. There's no distinction whatsoever between the so-called individual self and the so-called supreme self. Suppose you get this anjasa correctly. Then, saha deva upasyaha. Such a person, devanam, devanam, such a person for the gods becomes deva upasyaha, worshipful like a god. Such a person becomes worshipful like a god, pashutvacha nivartate, being freed from being an animal. That's the term. Being freed from your animal nature. And Shankara is actually paraphrasing from the last part of that passage that I was quoting from before. And let me find that. Nice. And these are nice passages to see. He says, this is actually, Ata yaha anyam devatam upaste. Suppose someone worships God as anya, others. God is out there. I am here. So devam upaste. Anyaha asau, anyaha aham iti. God is there. I am here. God is that. I am this. Those are the pronouns used here. God is that. I am me. So the two of us are different. So nasa Veda, that person doesn't understand properly. Yata pashu. That person is like an animal. Evam sahadevanam. For the gods, such a person who is stuck in this lowly way of thinking, the gods would consider, he's just... The gods in heaven look down upon ordinary people as animals. How's that? And of course, we are primates. So, according to the gods, everyone is a primate. But consciousness is not an animal. Consciousness is not a primate. So this is when you rise up out of the animalness of the, is that a word? We'll make it up. The animalness, in Sanskrit, pashutva sounds very good. In English, doesn't sound as good. So one recognizes that I have no pashutva. I have no animalness. As pure consciousness, I have no animalness. And such a person, instead of the gods looking down on that primate, the gods in heaven look up to this one. Because the gods in heaven are not necessarily enlightened. After all, they get into fights and arguments and all according to the mythology. So they're not enlightened. So even the gods in heaven revere such a person who has recognized one's own true nature as pure consciousness. Very good. Nice passage to see. And we will conclude here. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha sarve santu niramayaha sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya Mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.